Welcome to Living History. If you're new here, I'm so glad you stopped by. This channel is all about slowing down and stepping into the quiet, forgotten corners of the past, where the real people lived, worked, and shaped the world, one ordinary day at a time. This video is designed to help you relax, unwind, or even drift off to sleep as we explore the life of a medieval blacksmith. So get comfortable, maybe dim the lights, and let the sound of history carry you. No kings, no battles, just the steady rhythm of the forge and the story of a life built from fire and iron. In the heart of a medieval town or village, there was one sound you could count on hearing every morning, not the bells of the church, not the rustle of wind in the trees, but the sharp ringing clang of hammer on metal. It came from the blacksmith's forge, where fire, sweat and iron met to shape the tools of everyday survival. The blacksmith wasn't just another labourer, he was a skilled craftsman, and unlike the peasants working the fields, he held a position of importance in the community. His day began early, often before the sun had fully risen. The forge had to be prepped before any work could begin. That meant relighting the fire, stoking the coals and getting the bellows pumping until the hearth roared red hot. Without the fire there was no forge, and without the forge there was no work. Most medieval blacksmiths didn't live far from their workshop. In towns, the forge was often attached to the living quarters. In rural areas, it might be a separate structure, but always close. As the coals heated, the blacksmith prepared his tools: hammers, tongs, chisels and anvils, each one essential, each one shaped by hand or inherited. His clothing was practical and worn: a long tunic or work shirt, thick leather apron, and sometimes cloth wrapped around the arms or hands to guard against sparks. Gloves weren't common. Burns, blisters and scars were just part of the job. Once the fire reached the right temperature, the real work began. The blacksmith's tasks varied widely. He might be repairing broken tools, making new ploughshares, sharpening scythes or forging nails, hinges, horseshoes and iron fittings. In towns he could be commissioned to make weapons or armour parts, though that was more the realm of an armourer, a specialised trade in larger settlements. The work was loud, repetitive and physically exhausting. Every item had to be shaped by hand, heated in the forge, then beaten, bent or cut into shape on the anvil. The rhythm of the day was marked by the hiss of hot metal, the crackle of flames, and the metallic symphony of hammers. The forge was not a peaceful place, but it was the heartbeat of the village. Unlike the peasants, the blacksmith worked for payment in coin or trade days. He wasn't rich, but he had more control over his work and more respect. People needed him: lords, farmers, merchants, even the church. He was essential, and in the medieval world, being essential meant something. By midday, the forge was at full heat, the air thick with smoke, ash, and the sharp scent of burning charcoal. The blacksmith was well into his work by this point, his arms sore, face smeared with soot, clothes darkened by sweat and grime. The clang of the hammer echoed through the village lanes, sometimes joined by the rhythmic whoosh of the bellows, or the hiss of red-hot iron plunged into water. This was not mindless labour, it was a craft. Every piece required attention. Too much heat and the metal would burn, too little and it wouldn't bend. The smith had to judge the glow of the iron with his eyes, know the texture with his hands, listen to the sound it made under the hammer. It was said that a master blacksmith could tell what kind of metal he was striking just by the tone it gave off when hit. His work wasn't glamorous, but it was varied. A farmer might come in needing a new ploughshare, a wheelwright might ask for iron rims for a cart, a nobleman's steward might place an order for nails, locks or fittings for a door. And of course there were horseshoes, constant demand from travellers, messengers, farmers and soldiers alike. A skilled blacksmith could shoe a horse quickly and cleanly, though this often required the help of a farrier or apprentice to hold and calm the animal. Some blacksmiths also made weapons, simple ones like knives, arrowheads or spear tips. Larger weapons like swords or armour required a different level of skill and were usually the work of urban specialists, bladesmiths and armourers. Still, in smaller villages, a blacksmith might forge whatever the locals needed in times of trouble. He might also be called upon to repair items, broken hinges, cracked pots, bent tools. Iron was expensive and valuable. Nothing was thrown away unless it was truly beyond saving. Though it was physically demanding, the work gave the blacksmith a unique position in the community. Unlike peasants who laboured on land they did not own, the blacksmith had a trade, a skill he could pass down to a son or apprentice. He earned in coin or barter, giving him more flexibility. His name was known. He wasn't nobility, but he had a voice in the village, especially in small communities where every role mattered. Meals were brief and practical. At midday he might pause to eat bread, cheese, and perhaps a bit of salted meat or stew, if his household had prepared any. He would eat near the forge or in the shaded doorway, drinking ale or water drawn from the village well. Then, without ceremony, he would return to his fire. Iron didn't shake itself. As evening approached, the pace slowed slightly. Orders would be finished up, the forge carefully cooled down, tools cleaned and stored. If he had an apprentice, the boy would sweep the floor, collect scraps and extinguish the embers. Evenings might bring some relief, a visit to the tavern, a walk through the market, or time with his family. In towns, a blacksmith could afford a modest but stable home. In villages, his house was often larger than a peasant's, sometimes with stone foundations or even a separate space for his tools and materials. And yet the work never truly ended. Tools needed mending, orders had to be planned. Materials like charcoal, iron and nails had to be tracked and restocked. The fire that lit his forge also lit his life. Without it, he was just a man with a hammer. By nightfall, the forge's fire had faded and the hammer blows fell silent. But the blacksmith's work carried on in more than just the ringing of steel. It echoed in the tools used by farmers, the horses shod for travel, the hinges that held shut every door in town. In a world built by hand, few hands shaped as much as the blacksmith's. Unlike the peasant tied to the land, the blacksmith held a distinct position in medieval society. He wasn't wealthy or noble, but he wasn't poor either. He had a trade, a skill, a craft passed down from master to apprentice, often from father to son. His livelihood depended not on the whims of a lord or the harvest, but on the strength of his own hands and the quality of his work. In towns and cities, blacksmiths were often part of guilds, powerful associations of craftsmen that controlled training, pricing, standards, and reputation. To become a full smith in such places, one had to train as an apprentice for several years, usually starting around the age of 12 or 13. After that, he became a journeyman, travelling and working under other masters to build experience. Only after proving his skill could he become a master blacksmith, able to run his own forge and take on apprentices himself. In rural areas, guilds were less formal, but the apprenticeship process was still crucial. The knowledge of heating, shaping and tempering iron wasn't written down. It was shown, demonstrated, practiced over years of blistered hands and burned arms. The blacksmith's forge was also a place of quiet power. In some communities, he was seen as having an almost mystical connection to fire and metal. After all, he could take a cold, unyielding lump of iron and make it bend, shine, and serve. In certain folk beliefs, smiths were thought to have spiritual strength or protective qualities. His forge was where tools were born, weapons shaped, and metal purified, a sacred space in a way, even if no one said it aloud. Religion too played a role. Like every medieval person, the blacksmith attended mass, paid tithes, observed feast days, and structured his year around the church calendar. He might forge items for the church, iron candlesticks, gates, grills, or locks for the sacristy. Though his work was rough and physical, it was never far from the spiritual life of the community. But life was not without danger. The forge was a place of heat and risk. A moment's mistake could mean injury or worse. Sparks flew constantly. Molten metal could splash. The blacksmith's arms were often scarred, his lungs filled with soot. And yet he endured, because people needed him. His tools helped plant food, build homes, defend borders. In his hands, iron became civilization. As the village slept, the blacksmith rested too, knowing that tomorrow would bring more repairs, more requests, and more hammering. His name might never be carved into stone, but his work touched every part of medieval life. He built the world one strike at a time, and long after the fire in his forge had cooled, the legacy of his craft would remain, in the steel of old tools, the structure of towns, and the echoes of iron ringing in history.